For more years than I can count now, I've had people telling me, hey, I know you really like Stephen King. I think you should read Robert McCammon. Well, they weren't wrong. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back today to talk a little Robert McCammon with his 1991 novel, This Is Boy's Life. This is the 11th published novel by Mr. McCammon and the first one that I have read. Now, this, guys, has been a book, well, not really a book, but as much as an author, that has been recommended to me for a long time, but more so since I began this channel. And I reviewed Stephen King's The Stand back in 2020, and that was when everyone in the comments were like, hey, you like this book, you should read Swan Song, or you like King, period, you should read Robert McCammon. So I've been kind of bullied by fans for that long, and I'm happy to say I'm glad that they did. We're going to kind of get into why. Now, when it came to which one I decided to read first, I talked to Brian Lee Durfee a while back, and he said he thought, knowing what I love, the coming of age kind of story, he thought that this would be the best place for me to start. And so that's kind of why I went ahead and picked this one over Swan Song, and it was a little bit shorter, which, it's not short, but it's a little bit shorter than Swan Song. So did it meet the hype, guys? As a huge Stephen King fan, we are going to talk about that now, but begin like usual by talking about what is this book about. Now, it is 1964 in idyllic Zephyr, Alabama. It's a simple life, but it stirs the impressionable imagination of 12-year-old aspiring writer Corey Mackinson. He's certain he sensed spirits whispering in the churchyard. He's heard of the weird bootleggers who lurk in the dark outside of town. He's seen a flood leave Main Street crawling with snakes. And Corey thrills to all of it, as only a young boy can. Then one morning he sees a car careen off the road and slowly sink into Saxon Lake. Inside is a beaten corpse, naked and handcuffed to the steering wheel, a copper wire tightened around the stranger's neck. In time, the townsfolk seem to forget all about the unsolved murder, but Corey and his father can't. Their search for truth is a journey into a world where innocence and evil collide. What lies before them is the stuff of fear and awe, magic and madness, fantasy and reality. As Corey wades into the deep end of Zephyr and all its mysteries, he'll discover that while the pleasures of childish things fade away, growing up can be a strange and beautiful ride. Guys, it takes us all the way back to 1991 on a bike called Rocket. We're talking about Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. Now, let's get into, guys, like usual. Let's start with what makes it good or bad. Start with the good, and there's a ton of it, guys. It's mostly good. I'm going to go ahead and let you know up front. This is going to be a very positive review because it was a very good book. But obviously, for me, guys, coming of age, slice of life through the eyes of an 11-year-old boy. This is my jam, guys. This is where my heart lies. This little tiny subgenre right here. It's everything that I love in fiction. It's just something that I can never get enough of. But the thing is, being a big Stephen King fan, that's something he does extraordinarily well. He's always able to capture what childhood is like, how kids talk to each other is a bigger part of it, and just, a slice of life where nothing really is happening. It's just the day-to-day life of a character. And this story does follow Corey for, one calendar year. And I love that he's able to actually kind of capture that in the same way that King has. And this is something that a lot of people have recommended. So I think if you like that with King, you try this and you try it. I think Ray Bradbury is the only other one I kind of get that vibe from. But I'm happy to say this is very much, it gets that same feeling that I get when King kind of writes in this style. Now, I'm not going to say it's as good as King, obviously, my favorite author ever. It's going to be hard to kind of say, hey, this guy does this better than my favorite author ever. But it definitely gave me the same feeling I have when I'm reading a story like The Body or like It or something like that, where I kind of get that feeling of he's capturing childhood in just a perfect and brilliant way. And it's just done spectacularly well. I mean, like I said, I'm not going to say it's better than King, but I think it's very much in the same neighborhood. He's able to capture the magic of childhood, being completely ignorant to the problems of adulthood, just everything that is important in your life that may not seem important to you as an adult, but you think back to when you were 11 years old, that was life and death stuff there. And this deals with all those in just such a wonderful and beautiful way that would just remind you about what was magic about your childhood. And, for example, I look at like stuff that like my kids are doing, and I'm just like, I wish that they were experiencing it the same way I am. And I'm like, who says that they're not? They're children. They might be seeing it that way. You can't go back in time and see it that way now. You just always kind of think about it in a nostalgic kind of way. Surely kids today are experiencing childhood the same kind of way that you did. Times change, but childhood really, really doesn't. And I love that he kind of does this thing where something that may be supernatural is happening, but he doesn't really let you know. It can also just be, a childhood imagination, child's imagination. You think about the imagination of childhood, and you're thinking about just like some crazy things. Like at one part, he's like imagining that he's flying, but he's writing it in the story very much from Corey's perspective, in that, yeah, I'm flying, and this is nothing that I need to explain to you. It's just really, really well done. And I love that he never dumbs it down. He never holds your hand and says, here's what was actually happening. He just goes with it. And it's just one of those things that it doesn't need to be explained to you. You just get it. Or you don't. But I mean, I'm pretty sure you'll probably get what he's going for here. He just does it just so great. I love it. I love it so much. And I love the mystery that this book has. It has a mystery that will hook you right from the very beginning, and you'll want to know along the way. You're putting the clues together along with Corey here, and you're trying to slowly figure it out. Now, I've always been like a along for the ride kind of reader. I never like to think forward and stuff like that and try to figure out. I actually did figure this one out, but not everything about it. So I just kind of put it there. Even though you might figure out who the culprit is, you might not figure out the reasons why or how or when or any of that stuff. So it's done very, very well. I think back to as a kid reading like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and stuff like that. It kind of has almost like a childish feeling like that, but obviously much more well written. No offense to those books, but they are for the really, really young. This is very much, I think, an adult book, because it does have a lot of bad language and stuff like that, and violence obviously in it and stuff. But yeah, it's not the only mystery. There's lots of mysteries in this book, lots of little things in this tiny little town of Zephyr that I think that from chapter 1 you're going to know who's behind this crime, but you're also going to have many other questions along the way. And so another big thing is I think it deals with small town 1960s South America, southern United States very, very well. I think there's a lot of the social issues of the time are very prevalent. He establishes this small community. He gives everyone a voice. I think that's something very much in a keen way that he kind of does, but he doesn't veer away from the stuff that was going on in the 1960s, where things like segregation and civil rights and racism was very open and prevalent during this time. He doesn't veer away from those things, and I think he addresses them head on. And, not in a preachy way, just in the way that they would have been experienced by an 11-year-old white kid in Alabama at the time. I think he really does do it well. Almost kind of makes me think of like To Kill a Mockingbird kind of way. It really is almost like just childhood innocence with that, in that, children don't see racism, they're taught racism, that kind of thing. That's something I think is really, really kind of pushed in this book, and it's done very, very well. It never feels preachy or anything like that. It is something that is obviously needed to be talked about, especially when you were talking about this time period. But I love other things also, like the parents flipping out over rock and roll music and how it was going to corrupt the young. That took me back to my childhood, guys. I grew up when like Ozzy Osbourne was like taboo. Parents would not have anything to do with their kids listening to that. And to think that these parents are freaking out over the Beach Boys, the most PG, family-friendly band I can think of all time, baby. And these parents are freaking out over the Beach Boys. So you see, like I said, times may change in childhood, but a lot of the same things happen no matter what generation that you grew up in, So again, that's something that I think he captures just spectacularly. And oh my God, the magic of a bicycle to an 11-year-old boy, his bike in this Rocket. I just think back to, I don't know. I know kids now, they got Segways, they got iPads and stuff. They may not go outside. At least in my experience, living in the suburbs, guys, I don't see a lot of kids out there riding their bikes, but there are some. But I think in my time in the 80s, guys, that was it. That was your trusty steed. That was like your best friend almost. So I think that the emphasis that is put on how important this bike is to him is just so good. And he just captures, again, so well the things like that make your childhood is actually just so much special. And I love how this is kind of done in seasons. It begins with the spring and just kind of goes through the end of the year. And I love that. I think that there's a great way to show how time is changing. What you traditionally would kind of break up your childhood into seasons of, okay, well, the summer, obviously we're out of school. The fall, it means it's time to go back to school. Spring, we got spring break and stuff like that. It's not cold anymore. We can go outside. It's just stuff like little things like that you don't even think about, but I love the way that he does it. But one of the biggest things with this, guys, is Corey's relationship with his dad. It is really, really solid stuff. It's one of those things that will really get you right here. And me, as someone who did not have a close relationship with their father, but something where I'm like, okay, I want my kids to look back at me as a parent when I'm older and they're older, and feel the way that Corey feels about his dad here. That's what I would, as a parent, I think that's got to be like your goal. Is got to be to, to give that kind of life to your kids, kind of thing. So yeah, the ending of this will absolutely wreck you, especially if you have a tight relationship with your parents or you have young kids. I think it's something that will absolutely just completely devastate you. But it's so good, guys. It's got so much heart. And it's just a beautiful story that I think anyone's going to connect to. And you'll be fighting off the tears at the end. Or you know what? You might just go ahead and let them roll. So all the emotional beats are definitely there. So maybe what is not so good, I'm not necessarily going to call anything in this book bad, because this book was wonderful. Some things you might struggle with, though, I think if you aren't into the slice of life thing, I get this a lot with a lot of Stephen King fans. They're like, oh, I love 11/22/63, except for like that 200 pages where Jake and Sadie are doing like nothing. I'm like, wow, it's like my favorite part. I get that isn't for everybody. We are just going through a person's life, their day-to-day life. Nothing special is happening. I know some people will find large parts of this book being like, okay, what does this have to do with the main story? Nothing. It's just showing you what childhood's like. Do you think about everything over the course of the year? Do you ever have time where you're doing nothing? But I get that that's not for everything. That's not for everybody. Everyone's going to really dig that. I love that because it just really makes you feel close and connected to this character. What do they like? What does Corey like besides just trying to figure out this mystery? Who are his friends? What does he do on a daily basis? How does he feel about this class at school? How does he feel about his mom and dad? These are things that I think are important to building what this guy's childhood is like. And so I love stuff like that, but I understand some people, they don't like that. They feel like it's taking away from the storyline. It's derailing too much. So I get why that doesn't do it. It does deal, obviously, with segregation and rampant racism. That is very open. Nobody was really hiding their racism during that time period. So there's going to be some slang and some jargon that you're not going to like. And I think that that's purposeful. It's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, to realize that's what it was like and experiencing from a child's eyes. I think that's something that's there for a reason. It's the same criticism, obviously, that like Huck Finn gets from Mark Twain, but I think it's there for a reason. It's there to grab your attention and show you this is what it was like. It was a very different time. So I think it's important for that stuff to be there, but I understand if it's something that you don't want to read about. I get it. But to me, it's always something to look at and say, look how far we've come as a people. So I always find stuff like that, capturing what like a time capsule of what things were like at that period in our country's history. And some might find this a touch too long. To me, I found it, on par with your average Stephen King book. Like I said, it reads ridiculously quick, so I don't think that you're ever going to feel the length, really. But again, if you're not into that slice of life thing, there might be parts where you feel like, oh, this book could be like 100 pages shorter. To me, it could have been 100 pages longer. But again, that's going to kind of depend on you. Let's go ahead and move into, guys, why I think that you should read it. If you like the coming-of-age stuff that Stephen King does, and say, like The Body, well, it's a Stand By Me for people who don't know the book, or It, I think this is going to be exactly what you're looking for. He's able to get across all those things like your childhood friendships and stuff like that just the way that King does. And again, the way that kids talk to each other. That's the way a lot of coming-of-age stories miss, is they will be like, okay, well, I'm going to do this through the eyes of an 11-year-old, and they're talking like they're 28. Kids don't talk to each other like that. They're immature, especially boys, and I think that he's able to grab a lot of that, the way that they, guys can just, like, they haven't seen each other in a while, like, hey, asshole, and people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you're talking to you. That means that we love each other. It's just the way that we are. We're dumb. We're big dummies, and we accept that. And that's especially the way we are, pre-puberty, So I think that that's something that him and King have obviously done very, very well. It's a good mystery, too. Trying to figure out the mysteries of this story really is kind of what makes it go round, because as much as I love the slice of life stuff, the whole time, like, I wonder if this is a clue, for the car in the lake at the beginning, kind of thing. So if you want some things, I think, that are going to kind of take you back to your childhood, it's going to make you think of things, because this jarred a few memories for me I haven't thought about in a long time, which I'll kind of talk about my final thoughts here. But it's just a great standalone, guys, I think, to read between epic fantasy books. I think this is going to be something that you like quite a bit. It's low commitment. You're not going to have any problems kind of getting through it. It's not a slog at any point, I don't feel like, if you don't struggle with slice of life books. But again, if you're just reading these big, heavy series, it's great to have a nice standalone once in a while. So I always have read Stephen King all growing up, is to kind of break up those big, long series and stuff. So I think this will fit in just perfectly. Let's go ahead and talk about those final thoughts now. I want to thank all of those who bullied me to read Robert McCammon, because you're right. I know it's a small sample size. It's just one book. I do plan to read Swan Song next. Don't have a date for that. But I do plan to, I own it, so I do plan to read that one next. And if I like that book as much as even half as much as I like this one, I think I'm going to run through the guy's whole catalog. So I kind of almost hope I don't like it because I'm like, I got enough to read. Do I really want to add all that? But yeah, this hit all the same basic needs that I have in a book like this that King does. And I think that's the highest compliment that I can give Mr. McCammon. When he writes this type of story, if I get those same feelings, just warm nostalgia like King can give me when he's writing about childhood stuff in small town America. It's just something that's just always going to click for me. And he's the first author I feel like does it almost as well. So I don't know if this is a one-hit wonder or if this is going to be something that he actually does quite well a lot. I'm hoping so. So if he can capture things like that, I think I'm going to have a new one of my new favorite authors to really run through. But look, this was relatable to me in many, many facets. Let me give you an example. One that really kind of reminded me of something from my childhood. There's a kid in this that they're friends with, and one day he tells them, we got to move, and that's it. You're thinking, oh, well, they're going to be about them trying to, keep this kid in town, right? No, he's just gone. The next day, he's like gone. And it made me think about something. When I was like 4, my parents did a trial separation, and we moved out here to Texas while my dad stayed in Atlanta. And it was just kind of their, before they decided if they wanted to get divorced or not. And so we were out here for about 8 months. And in this apartment complex, I made just like some super close friends. Now, at that age, 4, you're able to make friends like that. It's not a big deal, right? But still, me and this one kid, Justin, were just like super tight. I mean, we were like super best friends, like more than you can imagine. And I remember the day I had to tell him we're moving back to Georgia, and he was just devastated. And here's the thing. I remember that we left early that next morning at like 5 in the morning, and he got up out of bed that day to wave at me while I left. And I hadn't thought about that 35 years, So this is that kind of book that really jogs the childhood in a way that you don't expect. And yes, it will shake the emotions out of you just like that. So amazing read, you guys. Pick it up ASAP. I think that you're going to have a blast with it, regardless of how old you are. Regardless if you're a boy or girl, I think you're going to have a good time with this regardless, because it will just take you back to your childhood. And even if you don't want that, it'll give you a really good mystery story I think that you will enjoy. So guys, have you read Boy's Life? Were you a disaster like I was reading this book? Hey, why don't you drop in the comments and let me go, guys, and I will talk to you there.